Napoleon Hill, you become what you repeatedly think. There comes a moment in every human life when the mind begins to whisper things the world cannot hear. A quiet voice inside says, "You were meant for more." Most people silence it. They drown it out with the noise of the ordinary, the endless chatter of fear, doubt, and other people's opinions. But a rare few, they listen. They understand that the world you see around you was first born in the invisible space of thought. Every bridge, every empire, every great company, every revolutionary idea was once nothing more than a single, persistent thought in someone's mind. Napoleon Hill called it the starting point of all achievement. Thought, the unseen architect of destiny. You become what you repeatedly think, not what you occasionally dream about, not what you say when you feel inspired, but what you consistently allow to occupy your inner world. Your outer life will always, without exception, rise or fall to match the nature of your dominant thoughts. This is not philosophy alone, it is law, a silent, unbending law that governs kings and beggars alike. Look back through history. Before Thomas Edison brought light to the world, he lived with the idea of light burning fiercely inside him. Long before Henry Ford built a car, he held a relentless vision in his mind, an image so real it became more vivid than the world in front of him. When Walt Disney stood on an empty, lifeless field, he didn't see dirt. He saw castles. He saw children laughing. He saw dreams in motion. What separated these people from the millions who never left the ground wasn't luck. It wasn't genius. It was the discipline of thought. They understood that the mind is not a storage room for fear, but a forge. And if you learn how to shape the fire inside it, you can bend reality itself. The truth is this: most people do not think. They react. They inherit beliefs from those around them. They let the outside world dictate the inner. Their minds are like gardens, left untended, overrun with weeds of doubt, fear, excuses, and regret. And then they wonder why their lives do not bear fruit. But those who understand Napoleon Hill's timeless law know better. They know that if you take control of the thoughts you plant, water them with faith, and guard them with discipline, your life can transform with a force the world cannot explain. This is where the power begins, within. Everything external is an echo of the internal. Your relationships, your opportunities, your wealth, your health, your success, they are mirrors reflecting what you've chosen to believe and repeat to yourself. And the most dangerous prison is not made of steel. It's made of habitual, invisible thought patterns. A man may be free on paper, yet chained by the stories he keeps telling himself. He says, "I can't. I'm not ready. This isn't for people like me." And so the mind obeys. It constructs a world that fits the belief. The mind does not argue. It executes like a faithful servant. It builds whatever you command, whether it's a palace of power or a cage of limitation. When Andrew Carnegie rose from poverty to unimaginable wealth, he did not begin with gold in his hands. He began with gold in his mind. He thought himself into greatness. He carried a mental image of abundance so fiercely that the material world eventually had no choice but to mirror it back. And this is not magic. It's the nature of consciousness. Whatever you repeatedly hold in the theater of your imagination begins to harden into fact. The human mind is the most powerful transmitter in existence. Every dominant thought is a signal broadcasted into the universe, and everything you experience is tuned to the frequency of that signal. Fear attracts fear. Doubt breeds more doubt. But faith creates miracles. A single dominant thought can ignite revolutions, birth industries, heal generations. But here is where most people fall. They understand this idea for a moment. They feel inspired. They make a vision board. They declare a goal. And then they return to their old patterns of thought. They feed the weeds again. They let fear whisper in the night. They let their habits write their future. And then they say, it didn't work, but the law never fails. It is not the universe that broke its promise. It is the mind that broke its discipline. To become what you repeatedly think is not a poetic phrase. It is a commandment. If you think weakness long enough, you'll begin to live it. If you think courage long enough, the world will begin to reflect it back. Thought is seed. Action is growth. Reality is harvest. That is why Napoleon Hill insisted, you are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul, because you have the power to control your own thoughts. The world is not happening to you, it's happening through you. Your life is the shadow cast by the inner landscape you have cultivated. If you want to change the shadow, you must change the light source. So the question becomes, what are you thinking? Not once in a while, not when you feel motivated, but every day, every hour, in the quiet spaces no one else can see. Because that is the blueprint of your future. The battlefield of success is not the boardroom, not the marketplace, not the stage. It is the mind. This is where fortunes are won or lost long before the first action is taken. Edison's light was born in darkness. Disney's empire was born in empty silence. Your greatness, too, will be born in the invisible realm first. And here, inside the walls of your own mind, you must decide, will you be the master or the slave? Mastery begins with awareness. You cannot command what you are unaware of. The first step toward power is to become radically honest about the thoughts you feed yourself every single day. For the mind is a faithful mirror reflecting not your wishes, but your convictions. If deep within you believe that greatness is reserved for others, your life will be shaped accordingly. But if deep within you begin to believe, truly believe, that your mind was designed not for survival, but for creation, everything begins to change. Napoleon Hill understood something few ever do. Every single thing in existence is created twice. First in the mind, then in the world. The house you live in was once a drawing. The airplane was once a wild fantasy. The skyscraper was once a vision, ridiculed by those who could not see what the dreamer saw. The invisible always precedes the visible. Thought is the architect. Action is the builder. Reality is the monument. When Henry Ford declared he would build a car for the average man, they mocked him. They said it was impossible. But he was no ordinary man. He was a man possessed by a thought that refused to die. He thought of it in the morning, in the night, through every obstacle and rejection. And because he refused to abandon the thought refused to abandon him. It grew roots in his soul. It shaped his choices. It pulled opportunities into his orbit like iron to a magnet. That is the unseen power of a dominant idea. But here is the truth that breaks most people. The mind does not give its treasures to the faint-hearted. You cannot plant a seed today and harvest tomorrow. Just as the farmer must tend the soil through seasons of rain and drought, so must you tend your inner garden through seasons of uncertainty. Thoughts must be fed with conviction, watered with persistence, and protected with discipline. If you abandon them too soon, they wither. If you feed them inconsistently, they grow weak. But if you hold them long enough, if you refuse to let the winds of doubt uproot them, they will bear fruit so abundant that the world will call it luck. There is no luck. There is only alignment between inner certainty and outer reality. And so, you must choose carefully the thoughts you allow to build a home in your mind. For whatever lives, there will soon live in your life. If you repeatedly think scarcity, scarcity will visit you. If you repeatedly think strength, strength will shape you. Every thought is a builder, and your mind is the construction site of your destiny. Greatness is never a sudden explosion. It is a slow accumulation of invisible decisions, tiny mental shifts, and persistent beliefs. The world celebrates the visible moment of victory, but the real war was won years before in silence, in thought, in faith. Edison's greatest inventions came after thousands of failures, but those failures never shook the one thought he kept alive. There is a way. He did not simply believe it once, he believed it until the universe surrendered. The universe does not respond to wishful thinking. It responds to unwavering belief. And belief is not just emotion, it is repetition. Repetition is the language of the subconscious mind. Whatever you repeat with intensity becomes your identity. Say to yourself, "I can't," and your mind will build walls. Say to yourself, "I will," and your mind will carve doors through those same walls. Every thought is a command. Every command shapes your reality. There are people who carry their defeat in their mind long before life defeats them. They walk with heads bowed, not because the world crushed them, but because they've already surrendered in their imagination. But there are others, rare, unshakable souls, who carry their victory in their mind even when their hands are empty. They speak like conquerors, act like builders, think like visionaries. The world eventually catches up to what they already knew. Andrew Carnegie walked the streets as a boy with pockets empty but mind overflowing. He envisioned empires of steel, industries rising from nothing. Those around him only saw smoke and soot. He saw future skylines. That was the difference. Where the common mind sees limitation, the trained mind sees opportunity disguised as struggle. The untrained mind fears problems. The disciplined mind feasts on them. Every challenge is clay in the hands of a thinker who has learned the power of repetition. Your thoughts become your strategy. Your strategy becomes your action. Your action becomes your future. And understand this, the mind does not work in neutrality. It is always creating. Even in moments of idleness, it is building something. If you do not command it consciously, the world will command it for you. Media will feed it. Negativity will occupy it. Fear will govern it. That is why most live as spectators instead of architects of their lives. They've surrendered the throne of their mind without even realizing it. But those who rise Those who stand on the shoulders of destiny are those who reclaim that throne. They stand guard at the gates of thought. They allow no seed of fear to take root. They choose with iron discipline what gets repeated in their inner world. They turn their vision into a mental movie they play every single day, morning, night, every hour in between, until that movie becomes more real than their circumstances. And once the mind believes with total certainty, the body, the world, and reality itself begin to obey. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper because they said he lacked imagination. Imagine that. A man who would one day build a kingdom of dreams labeled unimaginative. But he never accepted their verdict. He kept imagining. He kept believing. He kept repeating the vision that no one else could see. The result? Generations walk through the gates of Disneyland, a place born not from chance, but from relentless thought. So the question is not, can it be done? The question is, will you think it into being? The extraordinary is not reserved for the few. It is reserved for the focused. Those who learn that the battlefield is not out there, but in here behind the eyes, inside the mind. You become what you repeatedly think. And if that is true, and it is then to change your destiny, you must change your thoughts. Every human being stands each day before two kingdoms, the kingdom of thought and the kingdom of consequence. One is invisible, the other is visible. But the second always bends its knee to the first. What you allow to reign in your thoughts will one day rule in your reality. This is why the undisciplined mind lives like a ship tossed by the wind, drifting from hope to fear, ambition to doubt, purpose to distraction, never anchoring, never building, never arriving. But the mind trained to focus, the mind that learns to command its inner dialogue, that mind becomes unstoppable. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But concealed inside those famous words is a truth most overlooked. Belief is built. It is not a gift bestowed on the chosen few. It is forged in repetition, in endurance, in relentless inner focus. The great achievers were not born believing. They became believers because they fed one thought day after day until it became stronger than fear itself. It is in the private theater of your mind where the empire is won or lost, and it is in the moments when no one is watching, when the world is silent, that you either let fear creep in or you fortify your vision like a fortress. Fear is persistent. Doubt is patient. They will whisper into every crack you leave unguarded. That is why mental discipline is not a luxury. It is survival for the dreamer. There's a story often told about Lincoln during the darkest days of the Civil War, when the nation was tearing itself apart, when the cost of leadership felt unbearable. He would sit alone in his office late at night. The world outside was chaos, but inside his mind, he held one vision: a united nation. That vision didn't come from blind optimism. It came from a decision to think in alignment with what he wanted, not what he feared. And slowly, like a sculptor chiseling stone, reality began to take the shape of his persistent thought. You become what you repeatedly think because repetition is the alchemy that turns thought into belief, and belief moves mountains. This is where most dreams die. They are born in moments of excitement, but they are abandoned in seasons of silence. People let their environment dictate their thoughts, not realizing the environment is only the echo of what was once thought by someone else. If you do not shape your inner world, you become an actor in someone else's play. You end up living in cities built by the imagination of other people while your own dreams decay in neglect. But there's another path, a path walked by inventors, builders, visionaries, rebels, and leaders. They choose to live as architects, not spectators. They don't ask, what is possible? They decide what is possible. They understand that thoughts repeated with conviction become magnets. Opportunities are not stumbled upon, they are attracted, drawn in by the gravitational pull of a powerful mind. When a thought is repeated with clarity, the subconscious begins to accept it as fact. And once the subconscious accepts it, the body aligns, behavior aligns, habits align, and the world starts bending to the weight of that certainty. This is not superstition. This is how every revolution begins inwardly, silently, invisibly. Thomas Edison didn't simply have ideas. He held one thought at a time, like a flame cupped in his hands, and protected it from the winds of ridicule. 1,000 experiments failed, but the thought remained alive. That is why history remembers his name, not because he thought once, but because he kept thinking long after others stopped. And here lies a hard truth. Your life today is the sum of the thoughts you've allowed to dominate your mind yesterday. Your current reality is the echo of your past thinking. If you do not like what you see, you must change the thoughts that built it. If you want to change the fruit, you must change the root. No one can do this for you. Not luck, not fate, not circumstance. You must choose the thought and guard it like your future depends on it, because it does. Most people protect their possessions more fiercely than they protect their mind. They lock their doors at night, but leave the gate of their mind wide open, letting in fear, gossip, negativity, and distraction. And then they wonder why their life reflects what they didn't choose. The mind is sacred ground. Whatever you allow to grow there determines what you will harvest tomorrow. The giants of history understood this. Andrew Carnegie surrounded himself not just with opportunity, but with people who thought richly, expansively, boldly. He knew environment influences thought, and thought shapes destiny. He did not let the mediocre voices of small minds dictate his belief. He chose carefully what entered his mental palace. In your own life, you must do the same. You must learn to silence the noise. You must learn to sit in stillness and deliberately choose the thoughts worthy of repetition. You must learn to catch the whispers of limitation and crush them before they grow roots. You must replace "I can't" with "I will." You must replace "it's not possible" with "I will find a way." Every empire starts with these invisible substitutions. Every great transformation begins in the quiet corners of the mind. When Walt Disney walked through the barren land that would one day become Disneyland, people saw dirt, heat, and emptiness. He saw families smiling, music playing, dreams alive. They laughed at his vision, but he had already lived in it 1,000 times in his mind. By the time the first stone was laid, the empire already existed not on the land, but in his thoughts. And this is why your thoughts are not just ideas. They are blueprints. Opportunities are not stumbled upon, they are attracted, drawn in by the gravitational pull of a powerful mind. When a thought is repeated with clarity, the subconscious begins to accept it as fact. And once the subconscious accepts it, the body aligns, behavior aligns, habits align, and the world starts bending to the weight of that certainty. This is not superstition. This is how every revolution begins inwardly, silently, invisibly. Thomas Edison didn't simply have ideas. He held one thought at a time, like a flame cupped in his hands, and protected it from the winds of ridicule. 1,000 experiments failed, but the thought remained alive. That is why history remembers his name, not because he thought once, but because he kept thinking long after others stopped. And here lies a hard truth. Your life today is the sum of the thoughts you've allowed to dominate your mind yesterday. Your current reality is the echo of your past thinking. If you do not like what you see, you must change the thoughts that build it. If you want to change the fruit, you must change the root. No one can do this for you. Not luck, not fate, not circumstance. You must choose the thought and guard it like your future depends on it, because it does. Most people protect their possessions more fiercely than they protect their mind. They lock their doors at night, but leave the gate of their mind wide open, letting in fear, gossip, negativity, and distraction. And then they wonder why their life reflects what they didn't choose. The mind is sacred ground. Whatever you allow to grow there determines what you will harvest tomorrow. The giants of history understood this. Andrew Carnegie surrounded himself not just with opportunity, but with people who thought richly, expansively, boldly. He knew environment influences thought, and thought shapes destiny. He did not let the mediocre voices of small minds dictate his belief. He chose carefully what entered his mental palace. In your own life, you must do the same. You must learn to silence the noise. You must learn to sit in stillness and deliberately choose the thoughts worthy of repetition. You must learn to catch the whispers of limitation and crush them before they grow roots. You must replace "I can't" with "I will." You must replace "it's not possible" with "I will find a way." Every empire starts with these invisible substitutions. Every great transformation begins in the quiet corners of the mind. When Walt Disney walked through the barren land that would one day become Disneyland, people saw dirt, heat, and emptiness. He saw families smiling, music playing, dreams alive. They laughed at his vision, but he had already lived in it 1,000 times in his mind. By the time the first stone was laid, the empire already existed not on the land, but in his thoughts. And this is why your thoughts are not just ideas. They are blueprints. Every repeated thought is a line on the map of your future. Every belief you reinforce is a foundation stone laid down in your destiny. Guard your thoughts as a king guards his throne. Choose them with the same precision a sculptor chooses his tools. Feed them daily like a flame that must not die. And understand, greatness is not built in a moment of brilliance. It is built in thousands of invisible repetitions day after day when no one applauds, no one sees, no one believes. You become what you repeatedly think, not because the words are magical, but because the mind is obedient. It is the most loyal servant you will ever command. It will build for you either a palace or a prison, and it will not question the orders you give. There is a law woven into the fabric of existence, silent yet absolute. The mind will always build what it repeats. It does not ask if the thought is noble or destructive, empowering or limiting. It simply obeys. That is why the same power that builds empires can also build cages. One man thinks daily of courage, possibility, creation, and becomes a builder of nations. Another thinks daily of fear, failure, inadequacy, and becomes a prisoner of his own doubts. The difference is not in opportunity. It is in the pattern of thought. Most people underestimate the weight of their own thinking. They speak words of doubt, joke about their failures, casually repeat phrases like, "I can't," "It's hard," "Nothing works for me." But the subconscious does not understand humor. It only understands repetition. It hears these statements as orders and quietly begins to build a life that fits the script. It's not punishment. It's precision. It's law. Napoleon Hill often wrote about the definiteness of purpose, a mind fixed on one vision with unwavering clarity. He understood that scattered thoughts produce scattered results. A mind without aim is like sunlight diffused through fog, soft, weak, unfocused. But a mind with purpose is like sunlight through a magnifying glass. It can burn through steel. When a human being decides to think intentionally instead of accidentally, everything begins to shift. Think of the men and women history remembers. None of them were drifters. Edison wasn't a man of chance. He was a man of obsession. Ford wasn't waiting for opportunity. He was carving it with relentless thought. Lincoln wasn't wishing for change. He was thinking of unity so fiercely it outlived the war. They understood something most don't. Before the world bends to your will, your mind must bend to your vision. And make no mistake, the world resists the unfocused. It ignores the half-believer. But it eventually bows to the one whose inner image is carved deep like stone, the man or woman who refuses to let their vision be eroded by fear, becomes a force the world cannot ignore. You must learn to be ruthless with your thoughts, not cruel, but disciplined, because weakness of thought is the birthplace of mediocrity. Strength of thought is the seed of greatness. You must refuse entry to the whispers that weaken you. You must shut the door on every inner voice that says, "Not you," "Not now," "Not possible." Those are not your truths. They are echoes from a world that gave up on its own dreams. If you listen long enough, you inherit their fate. Carnegie was not handed an empire. He thought himself into it. He saturated his mind with the belief that wealth, influence, and impact were possible. Long before steel built his fortune, belief built his steel. He didn't let the noise of doubt occupy his inner space. He treated his mind like a sacred chamber. Only visions of victory were allowed inside, and that is why opportunity seemed to follow him like a shadow. What you feed your mind is what will feed your future. If every morning you repeat your vision, focus on your purpose, and give life to the image of the person you want to become, your subconscious begins to rearrange your world to fit that image. But if every morning you rehearse your fears, you strengthen your chains. There is a war happening inside every human being, the wall between belief and doubt. Most surrender to doubt because it arrives disguised as reason. It sounds rational. It sounds safe. But doubt is the quiet thief of empires. Faith, on the other hand, often sounds unreasonable. It demands courage. It demands trust in the invisible. It demands that you hold the vision even when the world shows no proof. Walt Disney stood in front of a swamp, not a theme park. He saw castles in the mud. He believed when no one else did. He thought his dream into being long before the first brick was laid. That is the mark of every visionary soul. They are living in tomorrow's world today through thought. Understand this: the mind cannot distinguish between a thought imagined vividly and an event experienced. If you hold a vision long enough, your mind begins to act as if it were already real. Your actions shift, your habits sharpen, your energy changes, and soon your reality starts to conform to what your mind has accepted as truth. That's why most people stay trapped. They are rehearsing their failures every day in their imagination. They are reliving every fear, every insecurity, every story of not enough. And then they wonder why life keeps repeating itself. Life is simply following the blueprint. If you want to break the cycle, you must break the thought pattern. You must become the architect of your inner language. You must speak to yourself with the same power that built Edison's light, Ford's machines, Carnegie's empire, Lincoln's unity, Disney's dream. Speak not from where you are, but from where you're going. Speak as the builder. Speak as the conqueror. Speak as the creator of your destiny. And remember this: clarity is power. A scattered thought cannot build. A wavering mind cannot command. Decide who you are becoming and think that thought like a drumbeat, steady, rhythmic, relentless, morning, night, every hour in between, until your inner world is louder than the outside world. Most people let their environment write their story. But the greats, the world changers, write the story first and let the world catch up. They do not seek proof. They become proof. When you take full command of your thoughts, life ceases to be a series of accidents and starts to become a work of design. The fog clears. Opportunities that seemed hidden begin to appear. People who align with your vision start to cross your path. Your energy becomes a magnet. It is not magic, it is law. The law that says you become what you repeatedly think. Guard your thoughts like treasure. Repeat them like prayer. Build them like an empire. And one day, the world will stand where your mind once stood alone. There will come a moment on your path when no one will believe in what you see, when your vision will feel too distant, too ambitious, too impossible for others to comprehend. And it is in that moment that you must choose to surrender to their disbelief or to rise as the guardian of your own thought, because it has always been this way. Every great dream that shaped history began as a single seed in the mind of one person, isolated, unvalidated, ridiculed, resisted, and then, ultimately, realized. When the Wright brothers spoke of flying machines, they were mocked. When Henry Ford spoke of affordable automobiles, they called him insane. When Lincoln spoke of unity, they called him naive. But they all shared one common trait, a mind locked onto a vision with the force of steel. Their repeated thoughts built their belief. Their belief forged their actions, and their actions carved their place in history. Most people never rise to greatness because they let the world's doubt infiltrate their inner kingdom. They hand over the keys of their mind to the opinions of the crowd. But the visionary understands, if I can keep my thought alive long enough, the world will eventually bend to it. The crowd will follow what it once mocked. What they doubted yesterday, they will celebrate tomorrow. You must learn to be fiercely loyal to your vision when no one else stands beside it. Because in the beginning, belief is lonely. Faith is quiet. Vision is fragile. It needs the fortress of repetition to survive the storm of reality. Every time you repeat the thought, you strengthen its roots. Every time you revisit the vision, you build another wall around it, protecting it from the winds of fear. And the winds will come. Doubt will come dressed as logic. Fear will come disguised as being realistic. People will speak from their own limitations and call it advice. But you must know the difference between caution and chains. If you let other people's small thinking define your horizon, your destiny will shrink to fit their vision. But if you hold your thought like a sword sharp, unyielding, unwavering, you will carve your own horizon. Napoleon Hill often said that the greatest weakness of the average person is the inability to persist in a single thought long enough to see it bear fruit. People scatter their mental energy. One week they believe, the next they doubt. One day they're consumed with vision, the next they're distracted by noise. But the world does not reward inconsistency. It bows to conviction. Think of Andrew Carnegie. He didn't build an empire by changing his mind every season. He chose a thought, a singular, focused vision, and he made it the sun around which his entire life revolved. Every decision, every relationship, every strategy aligned with that vision. And because he kept it alive long enough, reality had no choice but to yield to his clarity. This is the discipline most ignore. They believe success is about action alone. But action without a focused mind is like sailing without a compass. You may move, but you will drift. You may work, but you will wander. Power comes not from endless activity, but from directed energy, from a thought repeated so often, it becomes a law within you, a truth so absolute that your mind and body operate as if it has already been done. Walt Disney didn't see potential, he saw completion. Before the first ride, the first brick. The first gate, he saw families laughing inside Disneyland. He felt it. He lived it in his imagination. He held that image so clearly that others eventually saw it too. What began as an invisible thought in one man's mind became a kingdom millions can now touch. This is the true magic of repetition. It is not just mental exercise, it is creation in its purest form. The universe responds not to casual wishes, but to unwavering declarations. The dream must live in your mind before it lives in the world. And if you cannot hold it in here, you will never hold it out there. Most people believe when they see. The great ones see because they believe. And here's the hidden power. The more you repeat a thought, the more your nervous system accepts it as truth. Doubt weakens. Fear loses its grip. The thought becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes reality. This is why people unconsciously live the same lives over and over again. They rehearse the same fears. They tell the same stories. They think the same thoughts. And so their lives remain unchanged. But if you shift the thought, you shift the pattern. If you shift the pattern, you shift the destiny. Every morning, you wake up, your mind is clay. The thoughts you repeat are the hands that shape it. You can mold it into a life of strength, or you can let the winds of the world shape it into mediocrity. But the power will always belong to the one who takes control. Edison's light wasn't built by luck. It was built by a thought repeated through 10,000 failures. Ford's car wasn't born of chance. It was born of a stubborn belief that would not bend. Lincoln's unity wasn't carved from ease. It was carved from the relentless repetition of an unshakable idea. The same law that served them serves you. It does not care about status, background, or permission. It only cares about repetition. What you repeat, you become. What you feed grows. What you water blooms. The universe is indifferent to your dreams, but obedient to your discipline. So guard your thought like a seed in winter. Nurture it when no one sees. Protect it when no one understands. Believe in it when even you are tempted to doubt. Because every repeated thought carries within it the DNA of a new reality. There will come a day, if you persist, when the world will finally see what only you could see at the start. They will call you visionary. They will call it destiny. They will call it fate. But you will know the truth. It was repetition. It was thought. It was you. Every destiny begins in silence, not in applause, not in recognition, in silence. In the private battlefield of the mind, when no one believes, when no proof exists, when the world seems indifferent to your dreams, this is where the champions of history are forged. Because what separates the great from the forgotten is not talent, not intelligence, not even luck. It is the relentless decision to hold one thought longer than anyone else would dare. Napoleon Hill understood this truth deeply. The mind is both the prison and the key. The same power that traps people in fear can set them free into greatness. Most never learn to wield this power because it demands discipline, not for a moment, but for a lifetime. The average person entertains a vision, then abandons it when the world does not bow immediately. But the greats, the empire builders, the dreamers turned doers, they persist. They rehearse the vision so many times that the thought no longer feels like a dream. It feels like reality waiting to catch up. And when the mind begins to feel it is real, the world begins to shift. Look at Edison. 10,000 failed attempts did not break him because he wasn't experimenting with wires. He was defending a thought. There is a way, he told himself again and again. That single repeated sentence became his fortress. Each failure was just another stone in the wall protecting that idea. He did not surrender the thought, and so the thought did not surrender him. The light bulb was not the product of genius. It was the product of stubborn thought. Or consider Lincoln standing at the edge of a fractured nation, blood in the streets, hatred in the air, pressure on his shoulders. But in his mind, the vision of a united America burned with unshakable clarity. The louder the chaos outside became, the more fiercely he repeated that thought inside. And eventually, the outside world yielded to the strength of his inner vision. You become what you repeatedly think, because what you repeatedly think becomes the emotional blueprint your life follows. Thought leads to belief. Belief shapes action. Action builds reality. The pattern never changes. It has ruled emperors and farmers, inventors and artists, leaders and outcasts. It is the law behind all great achievement. But here lies the challenge. The mind is not an empty room. It is a crowded city of noise, fears, distractions, inherited limitations, doubts that speak in familiar voices. If you do not take control, these voices will. They will dominate your inner dialogue until your greatest dreams are nothing more than faint whispers beneath the roar of ordinary thinking. That is why clarity is not optional. It is power. To transform your life, you must take your most powerful thought and give it a throne. One idea, one vision, one purpose that everything else must bow to. You must choose the voice that will lead the others. Walt Disney lived with one such voice. It said, "Build a place where dreams live." When he faced bankruptcy, criticism, betrayal, the voice didn't leave. He heard it every morning, every night. It became louder than doubt, louder than fear, louder than the skeptics. And eventually, the world that once called him foolish now calls him a legend. Repetition is how ordinary men become legends. Repetition is how invisible dreams become visible empires. Repetition is the bridge between who you are and who you could be. But repetition is not passive. It's not simply thinking positively. It's training your mind like a warrior sharpens his blade. It's catching every weak thought, every excuse, every whisper of limitation, and crushing it beneath the weight of your vision. It's refusing to feed your fears with the energy of your attention. It's deciding day after day to water only the thoughts that build, not the ones that destroy. This is why gratitude, purpose, clarity, and vision are not cliches. They are tools. If you wake up each morning repeating the thought of who you are becoming, your subconscious begins to conspire with your destiny. It starts aligning your perception, sharpening your awareness, revealing opportunities that were invisible before. The world does not suddenly change. You change, and that changes everything. When Andrew Carnegie walked through the factories of steel, he wasn't just seeing iron and fire. He was seeing the future he had already built in his mind. Long before he held wealth in his hands, he held it in his thoughts. He didn't hope he knew. And that certainty was born not of privilege, but of repetition. The tragedy is that most people repeat the wrong thoughts. They rehearse their pain. They revisit their fears. They replay stories of failure as if they were prophecies. And so the future they build looks exactly like their past. But the future is clay. The mind is the sculptor. The thought is the hand. If you don't shape it, it shapes you. No one can control what thoughts enter their mind, but everyone can control what stays. And what stays becomes the seed of everything. You cannot plant thorns and harvest roses. You cannot plant fear and harvest freedom. You cannot plant doubt and harvest greatness. You must plant the vision, water it with discipline, protect it with repetition. Napoleon Hill wrote of definiteness of purpose because he knew when a man or woman decides, truly decides, to think one thought until it becomes reality, the universe rearranges itself around that decision, not overnight, not without resistance, but inevitably. Think of it, every empire began with a single mind choosing one thought. Every innovation, every revolution, every movement, every piece of art that shaped the world began as an invisible repetition in someone's mind. Edison, Ford, Lincoln, Disney, Carnegie, and countless others history does not remember because they did not give up their thought too soon. They did not scatter their focus. They did not abandon their vision when the world was silent. They held it, they repeated it, and they became it. If you want your life to rise, you must make your thought your anchor. You must make it your weapon. You must make it your prayer. Every night before you sleep, repeat it. Every morning when you wake, repeat it. Every time fear whispers, repeat it louder until one day the repetition no longer feels like hope. It feels like truth. And when the thought becomes truth inside, the world outside has no choice but to follow. There comes a moment when repetition stops being an act and becomes your identity. That's the turning point the world never sees. The moment when the thought is no longer something you hold, it holds you. It guides your choices, shapes your reactions, sharpens your focus. This is the quiet transformation that happens long before success knocks. It's not about the applause. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs it. This is why those who build extraordinary lives do not rely on motivation alone. Motivation flickers. Discipline burns. They program their minds with precision, like an architect drawing the first lines of a skyscraper. They return to the same idea over and over, carving it deeper into their subconscious until it becomes unshakable. When Henry Ford envisioned a car that the average family could afford, people laughed. They told him he was delusional, that it was impossible. The world around him saw limitations. But inside his mind, he saw assembly lines moving like clockwork, engines roaring, families traveling across America in freedom. That thought became his daily ritual. Every obstacle was filtered through the lens of that vision, and slowly the world bent to match it. You must understand, the mind is not impressed by your goals. It is moved by your consistency. A single spark can light a match, but only steady heat forges steel. You cannot whisper your dreams once and expect the universe to rearrange itself. You must chant them into existence with the rhythm of your discipline. You must repeat them until the thought becomes a command your subconscious cannot ignore. Napoleon Hill said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But most forget the bridge between belief and achievement: repetition. You cannot believe what you do not repeatedly tell yourself. You cannot hold a vision that you do not feed. Your faith must be louder than your doubt. Your vision must be clearer than your fear. There will be days when the thought feels distant, when your energy is low, when the world seems cold and unresponsive. These are the moments that define your future. Because the world doesn't reward you for thinking big once it rewards you for refusing to stop. Thinking big when everything tells you to shrink. It rewards the relentless. When Walt Disney faced financial ruin, when his ideas were mocked, when investors vanished, he returned to the same vision that once lived only in his mind, a world where imagination had no borders. And because he held on to it longer than anyone else, the world eventually caught up. Every great achiever has walked through darkness armed with nothing but a thought. They didn't have guarantees, they had conviction. They repeated their vision like a sacred oath, not because they saw proof, but because they decided to become the proof. And this is where most people falter. They want instant validation. They want the world to applaud their idea before they've even built it. But that is not how destiny works. Destiny waits. It watches to see if your thought is strong enough to withstand silence, rejection, mockery, isolation. Only then does it reveal its treasures. The path to greatness is not a straight line. It's a battlefield of inner wars. The first war is always with your own mind. Your fears will disguise themselves as logic. Your doubts will dress themselves in the language of reason. Your past will whisper that your future must look the same. But if you keep repeating your vision like a drumbeat in the night, eventually those voices begin to lose their power. Repetition rewires. It tears down old walls and builds new architecture inside you. Slowly, your default reaction shifts. Where there once was fear, there is calm. Where there once was doubt, there is certainty. Where there once was hesitation, there is momentum. You become the guardian of your thought, and in turn, your thought becomes the guardian of your future. Thomas Edison wasn't immune to failure. Lincoln wasn't immune to pain. Carnegie wasn't immune to doubt. They simply built a stronger thought than the storm they faced. And you can too. But this requires courage. The courage to believe in something that isn't visible yet. The courage to act like the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. The courage to choose your thoughts deliberately rather than be a prisoner of random ones. Because here's the truth. Few want to admit. Most people are not thinking. They're being thought by their environment. They're repeating what they hear, what they fear, what others believe about them. But greatness begins the moment you stop letting the world program your mind and start programming it yourself. Think about Andrew Carnegie, a man who rose from poverty with no inheritance, no special privilege. But he had one skill the world could not take, a way he could hold a vision long enough for it to become real. He thought of wealth, not in greed, but in creation. He repeated the image of the empire he would build until every decision he made aligned with it. The result? An empire that redefined an industry. When you repeat a thought long enough, it becomes a filter. You stop seeing the world as it is and start seeing it as it could be. You walk differently, you speak differently, you choose differently, and life, piece by piece, begins to reflect the pattern of your mind. That is the essence of Napoleon Hill's philosophy. That is the hidden law beneath every visible success. That is the quiet storm that builds empires while the world is still asleep. But make no mistake, this power is neutral. The same repetition that builds a visionary can build a victim. If you repeat fear, you become fear. If you repeat excuses, you become excuses. If you repeat scarcity, you build a life of lack. But if you repeat power, vision, purpose, and gratitude, the universe cannot help but respond. You must choose what thought will command your future. Not someday, not when it's convenient. Now, because the truth is, you are already repeating something every day, every morning you wake up, every night you fall asleep. Every thought you allow to linger is writing the story of your life. The only question is, are you the author or the echo? Edison chose to be the author. Lincoln chose to be the author. Disney, Carnegie, Ford, all of them chose the harder road, to think for themselves and repeat that thought until the world bowed. This power is not reserved for the chosen few. It's available to anyone willing to do what most never will, to stand alone with the thought long enough for it to take root. The moment you choose your thought and commit to it, something powerful begins to happen beneath the surface. Invisible forces start to move, not because of magic, but because your perception begins to sharpen. Where others see dead ends, you begin to see doorways. Where others see problems, you start to see possibilities. The mind that once chased distractions now becomes a weapon of precision. This is the power of a dominant thought. This is the quiet revolution inside every great achiever. When Henry Ford decided he would create a car for the masses, his engineers told him it couldn't be done. Over and over, they insisted the V8 engine was impossible. Ford didn't argue. He simply repeated his command, build it anyway. They returned months later with failure, and he repeated it again, build it anyway. The world remembers Ford because he repeated a thought stronger than any man's doubt. He held a picture in his mind until reality had no choice but to catch up. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. When your vision becomes unshakable, your decisions align. Your energy aligns. Your environment bends. And slowly, without fanfare, the impossible begins to take shape. But this kind of inner power demands a price, the price of isolation, the price of discipline, the price of delayed gratification. There will be moments when no one else can see what you see, when the vision burns only in your mind while others call you reckless, foolish, or naive. In those moments, the weak abandon their thought. The strong double down. Napoleon Hill studied these kinds of minds, the relentless kind. He found that behind every monumental success story, there was a period of silence, a season where the dreamer was alone with nothing but their thought. No applause, no proof, just faith forged through repetition. It is in these hidden chapters where character is carved and destiny is decided. Thomas Edison spent nights in the dark, testing filaments, burning through materials, failing over and over again. What kept him going wasn't external reward. It was the thought he repeated, I will find a way. That sentence echoed so loudly inside him that the noise of failure couldn't drown it out. And eventually, the world lit up. But understand this, a single thought is not enough. It must be charged with emotion. It must be soaked in belief, fed by action, and guarded with discipline. You must breathe life into it every day, as if the world depends on it, because your world does. Most people lose their vision, not because it was weak, But because they failed to feed it, they let distractions starve their destiny. They let comfort numb their fire. They let the opinions of the small-minded drown the voice of their own greatness. But those who rise to greatness, they protect their thought like a sacred flame. They do not let every breeze extinguish it. They build a furnace around it. Andrew Carnegie once said, "The man who cannot control his thoughts can control nothing else." He understood that steel empires are not built with hands. They are built with a mind disciplined to think one idea into existence. He did not drift with the noise of the world. He chose his thought and made it law. The tragedy of mediocrity is not lack of potential, it's lack of control. A scattered mind cannot build an empire. A distracted heart cannot hold a dream. If your mind belongs to every doubt, every fear, every fleeting opinion, your future will belong to nothing. This is why Napoleon Hill wrote of definiteness of purpose. Because when your purpose is clear, distractions lose their voice. You stop asking for permission to believe. You stop begging the world to understand. You simply walk the path with unwavering conviction. Walt Disney walked through the ashes of bankruptcy with that conviction. When he was told his dream of Disneyland was childish, impractical, and impossible, he didn't argue. He simply kept walking. Every night, he rehearsed the same image in his mind: children smiling, families together, a world built from imagination. That thought was not a fantasy. It was the seed. And through relentless repetition, he watered it until it grew taller than doubt itself. The world does not reward hesitation. It rewards clarity. It rewards the soul that knows what it wants and refuses to surrender that thought to circumstance. You do not need to be the smartest. You do not need to be the strongest. But you must be the one who will not stop thinking the thought when everyone else does. Repetition is not glamorous. It is quiet. It happens in the early hours when no one is watching. It happens in the late nights when the world is sleeping. It happens in the lonely spaces where doubt tries to whisper its poison. And it is in those spaces where legends are written. You must decide whether your mind will be your servant or your master. Will you program it or will it program you? Will you plant your vision or will you let weeds grow wild? Every moment you are repeating something. Every thought is a seed. Every seed is building a future. You become what you repeatedly think, not what you occasionally imagine, not what you talk about, what you rehearse in the silence, what you see when your eyes are closed, what you feel when the world offers no evidence. The future belongs to those who can hold that feeling longer than the storm can last. Ford held it. Edison held it. Lincoln held it. Carnegie held it. Disney held it. And every one of them, before they were legends, were just ordinary people alone with an extraordinary thought. This power is in you too. It has always been. But it will not awaken with shallow desire. It will awaken when you decide that your thought is non-negotiable. When you decide that your vision is not a maybe, but a must. When you decide that your destiny will not be written by fear, but by focus. And when that decision is made, nothing in this world can stop a mind that refuses to break. Every thought you hold is a silent architect. It builds long before your hands touch the world. It sketches blueprints that only time can reveal. The empire you live in tomorrow begins as a repetition. Today, a single idea rehearsed, refined, and defended against every whisper of doubt. This is why the truly great are never distracted by circumstance. They know the material of their future is thought, and thought is impervious to chaos if you hold it with discipline. Consider the life of Abraham Lincoln. He endured more defeats than most people face failures. He lost elections, was mocked by peers, and watched his nation crumble. Yet, in his mind, the image of a united America never wavered. Each day, he repeated it. Each night, he strengthened it. Each decision he made aligned with that mental blueprint. Victory did not arrive overnight. It arrived when he had persisted long enough for history to match the thought he refused to abandon.